Hello everyone, and welcome back to Shadow Reviews Ice Queendom. God, I hope never to have to do a video format like this ever again. Now, normally I would try to split these videos into like 3 or 4 parts so that everything is clear and concise, and all of you watching can try to understand what is going on in the show, and what I think about certain aspects of it. But as I have stated previously, this show is a manure truckload of shit. So today's video is just going to be a synopsis and my ranty opinions about this fucking episode. So the episode picks up with Yang and Blake in the house talking about what to do. So now we're getting an explanation of how they got to where they were last episode. You know, that would have been nice to see last episode, but I guess better late than never, right? They argue about what to do, and Blake hits on the idea to infect herself with the nightmare that infected John. Oh, so that's why they didn't kill it. Because they needed it to move the plot forward in this episode. But why would Blake do something so drastically dumb? Well, she argues that since Weiss is much stronger than them, and none of them can beat her, Blake should get a power boost from getting infected with the nightmare. Of course, Yang thinks this is terrible, and asks who will get Blake even if they free Weiss. Blake says that Yang can free her, and all I can think of with this moment is they would be caught in an endless cycle of getting infected and freeing each other, and then the show ends, but that's just wishful thinking, unfortunately. But before they can do any of that, they call Shion. Shion then says that they don't have a better option, and Ozpin signs off on it. Thanks, Shion. For someone whose specialty is this exact thing, you have all the usefulness of a rubber salt. So Shion infects Blake, and the whole dream starts to tear apart, which is a protracted sequence that goes on for what feels like forever, and with that we're already halfway through the episode. And that's with me skipping over the overlong scene of the rest of Team Juniper talking with Oz and Shion. Now, I would like to take a moment here and say that I did get something wrong from the last episode. Blake is not actually dressed as Raven, but she is dressed as Adam, because apparently her worst fear is becoming Adam. I guess since no one ever says anything in this show, that suddenly this makes sense. Although, can you really blame me for getting them mixed up? Despite the two characters having nothing to do with one another, they do have awfully similar designs. I mean, they both have black, edgy hairdos, red, they both have swords. It's a pretty common misconception. But they do actually have the characters talk about what they're feeling and thinking in this episode. See, Blake pointed out that the White Fang and the Schnee Dust Company share many things in common and are reflections of one another. You know, like how they were saying about Blake and Weiss being reflections of each other. Well, that's the last bit of good writing we're gonna get here. So they reuse the animation from the end of the last episode at this point in the episode, and Blake proceeds to kick Weiss's ass while villain monologuing at her. Yep, Blake basically says that the humans are awful and have used the faunus to fight their wars and that humans stole their land. Which, by the way, unless it's in a comic or book or something, I have no idea what Blake is talking about here. I know faunus are often treated poorly in this show, but man, we rarely see the faunus discrimination in the first place, and then we know nothing of the history of the world, so what Blake is saying is just extremely generic. Then she says something about Weiss wanting to kill faunus, and that Blake has brought the enemy she wished for to fight right to her door, and Weiss seems to kind of snap out of it for a second and says that this isn't Blake and that she doesn't feel that way towards the faunus. But then Blake goes full edgelord and says, "You don't know me," and that prompts Weiss to commit to the duel instead of coming around. So yeah, this was a stupid plan that doesn't get results, just like every other plan they've attempted. Now for the John section. He exits the train and ends up near his anti-nightmare super sword, and then that's it. That was the John section of the video. End of the episode. No, I'm not kidding. Now, what has Ruby and Yang been up to this whole time? Well, Yang is distracting the statue, and Ruby ran inside only to have the Black Knight stolen from her by Whitley. Of course, this was resolved in seconds because Ruby just shoots the bastard and gets it back. Then she goes to fight the nightmare and the episode ends. So, let me start by saying that the fighting animations in this episode were actually really good for once. But as I said to a friend of mine, I found where they put the budget. This episode has a lot of impressive visuals, but there's nothing of substance. There are now 2 plans happening at the same time. One is Ruby's, which boils down to charge at the nightmare yet again, but this time we can take a train instead of walking. The other plan is Blake's, which is so moronic it's not even funny. If anything in the show actually followed the rules that they have set out, then what should happen is that they would need to go into Blake's dream to free her. But then they find out they can't win because of the power boost she has, only to infect another member of the team, and it would spiral into an endless cycle of nightmares. But instead, Shion just goes, well, Blake took Nightmare on willingly, and I'm keeping it at bay, so one coin will fix everything. See, if there were actual consequences, or if any of the characters actually did things that put themselves in real danger, there might be some stakes in this show, but they keep throwing the death card out whenever a decision is risky. Now, normally that would be suspenseful, but there's no way in hell they would kill any of these characters. Also, with death being the only consequence that gets brought up, it actually lowers the tension as the girls keep surviving things that should be a lot more dangerous than they are presented. If they just had consequences other than death, there would actually be some stakes here, but instead they don't do that. Which is rather confusing when you consider that there could be something as simple as you'll be trapped in the dream until you fix things as a consequence, and that would solve a lot of problems right there. It's also sad that this show pretends that the girls have made a plan here, because if you think about what is going on, you quickly realize how dumb this so-called plan is. So the girls need to beat the nightmare, okay, that was established very early on, but they need to keep Weiss distracted enough to keep her away from the nightmare, because apparently she's so powerful she can just deal with them no problem. But how do they plan on beating the nightmare itself? Because all attempts to fight it so far have had very little effect. Well, let's ask Shion, the one person who is entirely dedicated to fighting this one type of Grim. Oh, Shion doesn't talk about beating the Grim. In fact, Shion is pretty fucking useless as a mentor or instructor. I mean, the girls also don't think, hey, let's ask Shion how to actually defeat the nightmare once we find it in the dream. But now we go back to the plan, which is to have Blake distract Weiss and Yang distracts the statue that can't even hurt them if they are inside of it, and since Blake's nightmare is producing an unlimited army of White Fang and Weiss has her own unlimited army of robots, the statue won't make a difference like last time. So why the fuck is Ruby fighting the nightmare on her own? This really is a plot that wears thin the more you think about it. Not to mention, unless they actually get utilized in the next 2 episodes, there's no point for the mini Weisses or Pyrrha to be here. They literally don't exist aside from making a point about maturity or something. So yeah, pretty much everything is useless. Alright, well, with episode 10 down, that leaves us with just 2 more episodes before I can put this series to rest. Thank you to everyone for watching to this part of the video. If you want to support me, like, subscribe, and comment. You know, all the usual things every other YouTuber asks you to do. Because you see, y'all are the reason why I make these videos, so the more people I see interacting, the more it inspires me to keep going. But this has been Veiled Shadow, and I'll see y'all next time.